Hello, in this video I'm going to show you a simple solution to integrate ChatGPT into Laravel. I've already set up a basic Laravel installation. Basically, we will have two options. One where we can create a post and another option with settings where we can save our OpenAI settings into the database. So here on the Create Post page, we have a prompt text area where we can write our prompt. And if we click this link, then ChatGPT will generate a response, and the response will be added into this text area or into this post editor. For this, I'm using TinyMCA, but you can use anything else, or you can even just use a simple text area here. We are not going to save the post, so we won't have any store and update methods for this. This is not the goal of this video. We just want to be able to communicate with the OpenAI API and execute a prompt. Okay, so I have already created the controllers. Basically, we have two controllers, a post controller and a setting controller. Right now, they just return a view. And I have created the views with just simple HTML. Basically, we don't really have any PHP code here yet. And it's the same with the settings view as well. And of course, I have two routes, nothing too complicated. And I've created a layout with some partial files, a footer, header, navigation. So for the head section, there is nothing really complicated going on. We just linked the Bootstrap CSS. And here we just use the stack to push any CSS from our view if we need to. And it's the same with the footer. Here we just included some JavaScript, jQuery, the Bootstrap JavaScript, and JavaScript for the TinyMCA editor. And this code is just to initialize the TinyMCA editor. We don't really have to go through this. And I'm also using stack here because we are going to need to add some JavaScript for the integration in the Create Post blade. Okay, so basically that's it. We will look at the HTML more closely when we are going to deal with the controllers later. I've also created the migration files for the posts and settings. Right now they are just in their default state. So let's start taking care of these first. Okay, so for the settings, we will basically need 4 additional columns. If you take a look at the settings page, we basically need 4 pieces of information from OpenAI. We need the API key, we need the model, name of the model, we need something called temperature, and we need tokens. I'm going to explain these one by one, what these are, but you can probably guess what the first 2 are. But first, let's fix this in the migration file. Okay, so first we need the OpenAI secret key, and here for the name I used this. So this is what we are going to use in the table as well. This is going to be a string. And this is going to be nullable. Okay, next the model. Let's copy the name. Again, this is going to be string. And here, let's set a default. And this is going to be GPT 3.5 Turbo. We'll check this in a second in the OpenAI documentation. We'll have to pay attention to these because there are many models that ChatGPT or OpenAI uses, and some of them are available for API calls, some of them are already deprecated, and this may cause issues, so it's always a good idea to keep an eye on these. Okay, next we need the temperature. Now the temperature is decimal value, so here we use decimal. So this has to be between 0 and 1. And here we also add a default value, which is going to be 0.5. Okay, and the last one we need is the tokens. Let's make it outside integer. And let's add the default here too. And let's make it 1000. Okay, so basically each OpenAI model has a maximum number of tokens that you can use in each API calls. It's a different value for all of them. We'll take a look at that in the documentation. And also it's calculated in a little bit weird way, but we'll get to that as well. Okay, so basically we are done here. And actually we don't really need to add anything to the post because we are not going to save the post in this video. So all we need is right here. Okay, let's save and let's migrate. Let's open the terminal. Okay, and if we check the database, the settings are here. We have our columns and we have our default values. Okay, so we are done with the migration. So as I mentioned, we will need our API key. You can get the API key from openai.com. You need to sign up if you haven't done so. I will just log in. I will select the API option here. So let's go here, and here you can get your API keys. Click View Key, and here you can create a new secret key. So create one and make sure that you save it because you won't be able to see it again. So if you lose that key, then you have to generate a new one. So the OpenAI API is not free, but it's very, very cheap. So if we go to usage, you can see that you have a $120 limit, but you probably won't reach this because you can generate a lot of content and you will still pay pennies. So it's not very, very expensive. I'm not sure, but there may be a free trial period. I don't know, I registered here a long time ago and I didn't have the free trial available anymore. If you have, then use that. But if it's not available, just go to billing, add your billing details, and then you will be able to generate your API key. As I said, it's very, very cheap and you will only pay what you use. So don't worry about this. Okay, so let's take a look at the API documentation and let's take a look at these 4 things here. Okay, so let's go to the documentation. And as I said before, we need 4 pieces of information. We already have our API key, so that's okay. Then we need model, temperature, and tokens. So what are models? Let's go back and let's go to models. Okay, so it says that the OpenAI API is powered by a diverse set of models with different capabilities and price points. So basically, a model is what you are interacting with. So for example, ChatGPT is a model. But if you want to integrate OpenAI, then you can select from a number of different models. For example, you can select the GPT-4, GPT 4.5, and so on. And if you scroll down here, you can see the available models. For example, for GPT-4, you have a number of options to choose from. For GPT-3, you also have a few more options, but as you can see, some of them are deprecated, so you shouldn't use them. So basically here I only added the GPT 3.5 Turbo, the Text DaVinci 003 and the GPT-4. And as you can see that models and tokens are closely related. Each model has a max set of tokens available. So tokens are basically chunk of text. One token can be one character or one word. It depends on the language you use and some other factors. So this means that in one API call, this is the maximum number of tokens you can use up. So if, for example, you want to generate a very, very long text and that would eat up all your tokens, then the API call will be unsuccessful. Okay, so once we are testing our integration, we'll come back to this and I will explain it a little bit deeper because it's calculated in a little bit of weird way. And because you would think that, okay, if I want to create long articles, then I will just set the tokens for the maximum value and I will be okay, but actually this is not the case. Okay, so I will come back to this once we have our integration and we can test it. The next one is the temperature. So as I said, this is a decimal value between 0 and 1. So basically with this value, you can adjust or influence the randomness of the model's response. If you set the temperature to a high value, closer to 1, the model's response will be more random. This can lead to more creative and diverse outputs, but it might also produce outputs that are less focused or consistent. And if you set the temperature to a low value, closer to 0, the model's response will be more deterministic and focused. It will likely choose the most probable next word or phrase based on its training. And this often leads to more predictable and coherent responses, but they might be less creative or diverse. So that's why I actually set the default value to 0.5. I think this is a good trade-off. Okay, and actually we already discussed the tokens. It's important to check the maximum tokens that you can use with the model. So for the 3.5 Turbo, we can use 4096. That's the maximum value that you should set here if you use this one. Okay, so let's save these settings. We'll come back to the documentation later. But right now, let's try to save these values to the database. Okay, so first let's create a seeder for these settings. So I just open terminal. Let's open this. We need to bring in the database, and here we'll just insert something random to the API column here. For the others, we have default values, so we don't need to add anything to the seeder file. And actually, we will update this data with our valid API key later. Okay, so here let's just add our table class. Okay, and let's run migration again. Okay, and if we refresh, we have our row here. Okay, so let's go back to the, we don't need this anymore. And we won't need this one either. Okay, let's go back to the settings controller. And from here, okay, let's bring in the DB. And from here, let's select this first row. And we need the first. Okay, and here we are returning the view, and here we use the compact function to pass the data to the view file. And now here in the view we can use the information from the database. I think here, so let's go to the settings view, and here let's display the API key that we have here in the database. We use the old helper from Laravel, and we need this. Okay, and if we refresh, now we have the data pulled from the database. Okay, so basically we can do the same here with the temperature. Of course, we need to change the name. Let's do the same for the tokens. Okay, so we have the default values displayed here properly. Now we need to do the same with the model, but because it's a drop-down, it's a little bit different. Okay, so we need to add this to the value. Okay, so this basically checks if the previous choice for the drop-down menu was GPT 3.5. And if this option was the last choice or the current setting, then it adds the selected to the option. And this will tell the browser to select this option when the page loads automatically. Okay, so let's add the same for the second one and for the third one. Okay, and if we just select GPT-4, and if I refresh the browser, it will display the saved option from the database. Okay, so let's go back to the controller and let's create a new method. Let's call this update settings. And here we will need the request object. Here we need to bring in the validator because we are going to use this to validate the data. So first let's add some checks. So we'll add this check just in case the setting is not or cannot be found. Then we can validate the data from the form. I will just paste the data here, so it's faster. You don't have to watch me type everything out. So we get all 4 fields, and they are nullable. You can add other validation rules here if you want. These are okay for now. Okay, so after the validation, we need to make sure that we have a check. If it fails, and it will return with an error message. And if everything okay, we'll save all the data and we'll return with a success message. Well, actually, we don't really need the route here. We can just add back like here. So this should be enough. Let's check it. Let's just refresh the site. Let's add something here. Let's select a different model. Let's change this to 2000 and save settings. And of course, I don't have a route for this. My bad. Okay, so I added a new route for this. And of course, we need to update the blade here, the action. And let's use the name of the route. Okay, the method is post, and now it should be okay. Okay, so I select a different one and click Save Settings. Okay, let's just refresh. Okay, I made a mistake here. The controller, this should be setting and not settings. We are using this here. Okay, so let's go back. Let's just refresh. Okay, and now actually it saved it. We don't have any success message. We'll take care of that later. But if we refresh the database, we can see that we have the new data here. Okay, so that's actually good. It's working. So now we can save our OpenAI details in the database. Let's move on to the create post part. This is going to be the main thing here. So here actually I'm just going to do the same. I will just paste the code here and we'll just go line by line and I will explain everything what the code does. Otherwise it would take too long to just type out everything. Okay, so now we have arrived at the interesting part. So here we basically have to make this work. So if we put some instruction here and click this link, then the ChatGPT response should be added here in the editor. Actually, this is going to be a two-part task. First, we need to create a new method in our controller, and then we have to make this work with some JavaScript. Let me just paste the method here, and then we will go through it line by line. Okay, so this is the method that will take care of this text generation, and this is where we will connect to the OpenAI API. So here we have a new method called generate GPT text, which takes the request. And first we fetch the data from the settings table, because of course we will need to use the API key and the other settings from there. Then we will also save our API key in another variable here. and then we'll have a try catch block. Okay, so if an exception or an error occurs within this try block, then the execution will be passed to the catch block here, and we'll get an error message. Okay, so here we will make an HTTP post request to the OpenAI API endpoint. And actually we are using HTTP here, so we should bring it here as well. So it's very important that we use this API endpoint. You can find the API endpoints here in the documentation, how you use your data section. And it's important that we use this endpoint. Okay, there are other endpoints we can use, but then they will do different things. So, for example, within this one, and actually this is already deprecated, but within this one, we only have these models available. Okay, so here we set a maximum duration of 80 seconds for the request. You can play around with this number because, you know, sometimes it takes some time for ChatGPT to generate the content, and you know, we don't want a timeout error. Especially if you use GPT-4, then it will take even longer. So here we set the necessary headers for the request, and here we add our API key. So this is kind of a security part of the request. This is how OpenAI will know that the request comes from you. And we set the content type to JSON, and here we basically tell OpenAI what kind of data we are sending. Then we tell OpenAI what model to use. So we get the model from our database, and then we have the messages array. And this is kind of like a conversation. You know, it tells OpenAI what has been said so far. So the first message is from the system. It tells the AI that its role is to be a helpful assistant. And actually, this is something you can also move to the settings option, and you can add a number of different content here. So you can instruct the AI to act as a helpful assistant or act as a SEO content writer or something like this. And the second message is from the user, and actually this is the prompt that we will add here. Then we have the max tokens. So basically this will tell OpenAI how much text to write. This is also coming from the database. And then we have the temperature value, and we've talked about this. This is basically telling OpenAI how creative or risky to be in the in its writing. Okay, so basically this is a very important part, because this tells OpenAI how much text to write, how creative to be, and so on. So next we have this line. This basically converts the response body from a JSON string to a PHP associative array. Then we have an if condition. So it checks whether the response from the API, the generated text, is present in the response array, and if the function returns this data in JSON format. And if the desired response from the API is not present, then it assumes that an error has occurred, and the code fetches the error details from the response array and returns them in JSON format. So in very simple terms, this method is designed to make a post request to the OpenAI's API and either return the generated text if the request is successful, or return error details if the request fails. Okay, so this is basically it. One last thing we have to do here is we need to create a route. So let's go to web.php and let's add a route, and we will use it in the view. Okay, so basically what we have left to do is make this work on the front end, but for this we need some JavaScript. Okay, so let's make this work. So here in the create post view, we have the form here, and here let's add the JavaScript. Okay, so it's a little bit of a long code, but I will go through it and explain it. So on the form we have our IDs for the elements, so we can refer to these parts from the JavaScript. Okay, so with this main event listener, we tell the code to wait until the web page has fully loaded before running any of the code inside this event listener, or inside this function. Then we create a variable for the generate article button, or rather link, the execute prompt link. And then we add an event listener to this link with the click event. Okay, so we basically say that when we click the link, then do this, what's inside here. So we add the prevent default to prevent the default behavior of the form. So we don't want the form to be submitted when we click this link. Next, again, we create a variable and we store the GPT prompt box and its value inside this variable. So basically, the GPT prompt box is the text area. So the value what we add here, so what we add here will be stored in this const variable. Then we check if the text area is empty or not. If it's empty, it shows an error message and stops the rest of the code from running. Okay, so basically this is important to add, otherwise it will send an empty request to the API and that could cause a problem. So it's important to add this check here. Okay, so it seems like I've used the language strings of Laravel here. So let me just change this to hard-coded text. You must provide a prompt. Okay, next we will change the text while it's working. So let's change this to working on it. Okay, so we do this because it may take a few seconds to generate the response. So we want to show something to the user. You could add a progress bar or a loader or something. It's just simpler for this example. Okay, so next we use the fetch API to send a request to the server to ask the AI to generate some text. I believe we need to change this route to post GPT. Right, we need to delete this part. Okay, so it's different for me because normally you would want to add these pages to your administration area. Right now it's not protected, but if you do this on a production side, you want to protect these pages with a middleware or some other ways. But for now it's okay. Okay, and here we specify that the HTTP request is a post request, and here the body is the data that you are sending to the server. In this case, we are sending an object with one property called prompt, which holds the text of the prompt, which is stored in this variable. And we use the JSON stringify to turn this object into a JSON formatted string, because that's how the server expects to receive the data. Then we are setting two headers. Just like in the controller, we are telling the server that we are sending the data in a JSON format. Then we include the Laravel's CSRF token in the request. Laravel includes a CSRF token in the meta tag of the HTML, which I totally forgot to include here. So let's just add it here to the head layout. Laravel includes this in the meta tag, and here we are including it in the request. And the server will check this token and refuse the request if it doesn't match what it expects. The next one is a then handler, and this part waits for the server's response, and if the response indicates an error, it throws an error, otherwise it processes the response data. Next, we have another then handler, and this part handles the processed data. If there is an error, it shows an error message. If not, it puts the AI-generated text into the TinyMC editor on the web page. Okay, so here we have a switch statement here and here, and it checks a number of different errors that can occur. So if you have an incorrect API key, then it will display the appropriate error message. And again, I have some language strings here. So let's just change this to execute prompt. So it will change the text on the link back to execute prompt once the response came back. Let's just change this to incorrect API key. Let's change this to prompt too long, and let's change this to unexpected error. Try again. Let's save this. Let's add this here. It's the same. Okay, so I changed all the language strings, so it's a bit more straightforward. Okay, so here we have two different switch statements inside an if-else statement, because there are different error types that can be that needs to be handled. One is the error code, so you could receive an error code, or you could receive an error type, and this is why we have this inside an if-else statement. But if there is no error, then we put the AI-generated text into the text editor, and we clear any existing error messages, and setting the display to none. Okay, so if everything went according to plan, then we don't need this part, but if there is an error, then it will jump to this section. Okay, so this is it. It should work now. Okay, let's see if we got this right. Okay, so here we are. Let's check if we click this link when it's empty. Okay, so we got to this point. Okay, let's add a question. What is a black hole? Okay, so we got an unexpected error. That doesn't really tell us much, but let's check the Laravel log. Oh, actually, I made a mistake here in the post controller. I didn't add the DB here, and we are using the DB, so we have to add it here. Okay, let's just clear this log just in case. Okay, so let's add the question again. Okay, the API key is not correct. So actually, the code works until this part because we get the error message. Okay, so again, if you want to get the your API key, go to here and click View API Keys, and from here you can create a new API key if you haven't created yet. So let me just add mine. So I'll go to Settings and I paste it here. And let's change back this to GPT 3.5 Turbo. I think the GPT-4 model is not yet available for API users. I think I just saw a message here that it's only available if you have made at least one payment. Anyway, it's fine for us, the GPT 3.5 Turbo for testing. And let me just check the max tokens. That's 4096. So let's add it here and click Save Settings. Okay, and save the settings and go to Create Post. So let's try this again. Now we get an error again. Prompt too long. Let's go to the settings page. And we set the tokens to the maximum numbers. So let's try a smaller value here, maybe 1000. Click Save Settings. Let's go back. I'll ask the question again. And now we have the answer. So what's going on? I mentioned a little bit earlier that the max token number is a little bit difficult to understand at first. So basically, setting the max token number to the maximum allowed value doesn't necessarily mean that you will be able to generate this many words or near this many words. So we are using this model, and the max tokens are 4096. It doesn't mean that we should set this number in our settings. It's not a hard limit. It's just a guidance for the model about how long of a response it should generate. So when we set the max tokens to 4096, we are asking the model to generate a response that uses all available tokens, which might be too much for what we actually need. And another thing that we also have to consider that the prompt is also calculated into the number of tokens. So when we are looking to create a 1000-word article with a 200-word prompt, the sufficient limit for the tokens may be around 1400 or 1500. It takes into account both the length of the prompt and the length of the desired output. And we still have a bit of a room to spare. So setting the max tokens to a value significantly higher than what we need might cause issues due to how the model manages its available tokens to generate a coherent and complete text. It's trying to fill all of those tokens with meaningful content and may get stuck trying to generate such a long response. Okay, so if we go back here and we should reconsider the number of tokens we use. So the best way to do this is to multiply the number of words you need by 1.33. So for example, if we need a 500-word article and we have 100 word prompt, that's 600. That's 798. So this 1000 should be okay for us. Okay, so let's go back. Let's go back and let's ask ChatGPT to write a longer text. Please write a 500 long article about Okay, let's see if this setting is gonna be okay. Okay, I misspelled. It should be in a simple and easy to understand way, but ChatGPT understands it. Okay, so it writes a title. For some reason it adds the word count, but actually it really depends on how you ask the question. So you can create a prompt that includes this instruction. Okay, so it's 495 words altogether. Actually, it's really, really cool. So this is working. So the prompt is processed perfectly. If you want, you can try to add some options to customize, so it's not in one line the whole thing, but the main thing is that it's working. So for example, you put a link here to insert a prompt, and if you click on it, a pre-written prompt would be inserted here to speed up the process. So you can build on this, and hopefully you found this useful. And if you have any questions, just leave a comment below. And if you like this video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to our channel. Thanks very much.